Expedition 33, made by a team of almost 33 people, sells 3.3 million copies in 33 days, and they announced it at 3:03 p.m. Like, is this even real life, or am I living in some kind of DMT trip? And they've just basically fired shots at the entire AAA industry in a new interview. We love to see it. And honestly, who can blame them when you look at these results? Clair Obscur, from a studio most people hadn't heard of a few months ago, Sandfall Interactive, with practically zero marketing budget, pulls in over $1 million in sales in its first 3 days. This wasn't built on fake hype or some massive advertising spend, it was just word of mouth, actual reviews, people just saying this is a good game. I mean, think about this. Clair Obscur hit 145,000 concurrent players on Steam, and Avowed, which also launched on Game Pass but came from the legendary studio Obsidian, just managed about 19,000 concurrent players. That to me is very telling. Sandfall's secret is a familiar one. They said they wanted to make a game they would actually enjoy, and we've heard that before from Larian. That player-first mentality, actually caring about the game itself. It turns out that that pays off more than once. Revolutionary, I know. And part of that player first thing seems to be respecting our time. Clair Obscur's publisher Kepler had one of their people, Matthew Harandrahan, say that brevity should be more of a virtue in gaming. And you know what? He's not wrong. Most of us would take a tight 10-hour quality game with a deep narrative over some 100-hour bloated mess where you burn out before even finding the main questline. And I am looking at you, Starfield. It's simple really. Size doesn't equal quality. Size doesn't matter. Or so I've been telling myself for many years. But seriously though, Sandfall's producer Francois Maurice said the value that players get from games does not align systematically with the length of the game. And Clair Obscur itself, according to Harandrahan, doesn't offer any sense of bloat or extraneous things that are put there just to make it larger and larger and larger. Imagine that, right? A game that actually ends when it's supposed to. Meanwhile, how often do we see these AAA bloated games bragging about map sizes, the equivalent of a small country, then filling it with sod all but randomized fetch quests. Also, they can just justify those ever increasing price tags by telling us, look how big this is. And it's not just about the length, is it? It's about the actual cost. Sandfall and Kepler are a bit coy about the exact budget for Clair Obscur, but they've said that most guesses are way too high, and that games like Mirror's Edge or Vanquish from over a decade ago probably cost more. So we're likely talking about under 30 million. When was the last time that a truly massive budget game outside of maybe a Rockstar release hit this kind of critical and commercial success? They keep missing the point, just ploughing hundreds of millions into these huge bloated games, and then what happens? Layoffs, studio closures, and then more often than not the players get the blame for not appreciating their mountains of slop. And Clair Obscur has just proven all of that wrong. Kepler's Matthew Harandrahan just called it the irresponsible practice in the industry. He said, and this is a direct quote, that there is a human cost to running things this way. And yeah, there is. People lose their jobs. God knows how many layoffs we've seen in the industry over the last few years. And meanwhile, Sandfall kept their core team to an average of about 30 people for the main development, using outsourcing where needed, and Harandrahan calls that a very smart and sustainable way to manage game development. So it turns out that you don't need to burn a GDP-sized pile of cash to make something good. They even mentioned DLC and how it was planned from the beginning, and of course my alarm bells start ringing, my blood pressure starts rising when I hear those things. But with Clair Obscur, this does feel different. Their creative director Guillaume Broche, I hope I pronounced that right, said that because the game got such a massive response, they needed to reconsider what they were doing next, and have instead started focusing on fine-tuning the base game first. Now that is rare, a developer wanting to make sure the main game is as good as it can be before selling you more stuff, especially when the industry standard is selling you a season pass for a game that's barely functioning. For me, it's a sign that they truly understand their priorities, and I think that needs calling out. But where this gets really interesting is cut content has already been discovered. Unused items, bits of areas. It feels more like they had a ton of ideas and some just didn't make the initial cut, maybe due to time, budgets or whatever. So when the DLC eventually arrives, and make no mistake, it's coming, it's just a case of when, not if, it's likely coming from a well of actual concepts. Things that they didn't get a chance to implement in the base game, not just rushed out filler. It's that player first, quality driven mentality again, and I respect that. And that player first mentality strangely seems to extend all the way up to their publisher, Kepler, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say. Now, these guys appear to actually be a different breed. Their whole philosophy is about backing original titles with eye-catching art styles and mold-breaking gameplay. They actively avoid chasing trends. And thank God for that, because Clair Obscur is some weird, definitely obscure shit, and that's a huge part of its charm for me. For most of my 30 odd hours with it, I had no clue where the story was going. Nothing is predictable. They took actual risks on complexity instead of just copy pasting a tired concept and building a game around it. And it seems that they practice what they preach. Kepler is apparently co-owned by its individual studios, who all operate autonomously. The creative minds are just allowed to actually be creative, get the juices flowing, and just crack on. Compare that to the usual suspects, Ubisoft, Activision, where if there isn't an immediate, obvious, commercially measurable opportunity, any good idea just gets stifled, thrown in the bin, every single time. And that belief in the vision even extends to its price tag. Clair Obscur launched at $50, and I remember when they announced it, there was actually a bit of backlash online. Some people were suspicious, thinking that it was just too cheap to be any good, and I can't lie, perhaps I even got caught up in that myself. But that is a clear sign of corporate brainwashing. We've been conditioned to think that a higher price equals a higher quality, but it rarely, if ever, does. It's a complete warping of the mindset, and more studios are trying it on. Just look at Randy Pitchford at Gearbox basically telling everyone last week to stump up $80 for Borderlands 4 or just sit and swivel. But Sandfall and Kepler stuck to their guns with the $50 price, and it turned into what they called a win-win situation. Often these ridiculous AAA price tags are a direct consequence of the bloated budgets and the desperate scramble to claw that cash back, with us, the players, as the victim every time. We're in a cost of living crisis, but we're still expected to pay through the nose for half-baked, lackluster games, often riddled with predatory microtransactions just for good measure. Kepler even said that as AAA prices go up, it creates more of an opportunity for sensibly priced, sensibly scoped games like Clair Obscur to come in at that $40 to $50 mark. And it turns out that you can offer fair value in 2025. Who would have thought? And sure, some games can make it work at that price point. GTA 6 will sell millions, even if it costs $100+. And after 13 years in development, you'd bloody hope so as well. But that doesn't make the sky-high budget approach right for everyone else, because all it does is give other publishers a perceived green light to try and meet that same price point. Clair Obscur for me feels like a small island of sanity in an otherwise pretty turbulent, crazy ocean. You could even argue that Baldur's Gate 3, at least when it first launched, had that same AA spirit, a focus on the game, not just a mega corp machine, and look how that turned out. But the best part for me is the player win is happening in real time. Games like Clair Obscur are getting the recognition they deserve. The market is shifting. Eyes are being opened, partly because the alternatives, those massive AAA failures, are just failing left, right, and center. The only real question left is at what point do we and they stop just actively rewarding those bad habits? Maybe that whole 33 thing was really just the universe's way of telling the industry to try something better for a change. Clair Obscur is a genuine modern masterpiece. I was genuinely sad when I finished it. I haven't felt that about a game in a long time, and if you haven't played it, I highly recommend it because you're missing out. Anyway, make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, but most importantly, keep demanding better games. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.